All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started here. And if more people join, which they usually do, we have like 50 people signed up. So if more people come, that's fine. Okay, everybody can see this. So my name is Rachael Wonderlin. I'm a dementia consultant. I've been doing dementia care stuff for the last decade or so. And I wanted to mention that this webinar is sponsored by Ellie Cares, which is an awesome, awesome application. I will show you all a little bit about that at the end. And so stay tuned for that. Ellie Cares is an awesome app that's built for people with early stages of dementia or mild cognitive impairment and their caregivers. This means that it's unlike, honestly, any other app, anything that I've seen on the market. And they continue to iterate and build into it. In fact, there will soon be an option inside of the app to schedule calls and chat with my team to get dementia care advice and information, which is really cool. But the application allows a multitude of things. Probably one of the coolest is that it provides safe zones for your loved one with dementia. So as long as they have their phone with them, you can actually set parameters outside of your house. So if they like to go on walks, it will alert you if they go outside of that. They are building in a piece of the application that's going to make it so you can get through to the person via call, and it will answer, the phone will answer the call even if they aren't answering it. So there's a multitude of options and things that are going to be really cool here to help caregivers and to help people living with dementia stay independent longer. So we'll check out their site. But for right now, let's dive in. We're going to talk about how to handle caregiver stress and burnout, which is a very, very real thing that we see all the time. Here are all the things that I've seen and heard working in dementia care. I call this the roles of guilt and shame. I've heard things like, oh, well, people think I'm lazy if I move her into dementia care. Oh, I'm not doing enough. I actually just saw this on Facebook the other day from somebody I know who's taking care of his parents. He said, I should have done more for them. And I said, there's nothing else you could have done. You did everything you could do. What else could you have done? People say, oh, I should be more upset. Or I'm embarrassed by him in public spaces, and then I feel bad about feeling that way. So I've heard it all. And frankly, these are big reasons why families resist transitioning somebody into a dementia care community, even when that might be the best thing that they could do at that point in time. I could have, I should have, but if I'd only, feeling guilty really is the ultimate caregiver villain. And it's what inspired me to write my first book, because I was working in a dementia care environment as a dementia care director at my first building in 2014, which, believe it or not, was a decade ago at this point. And I kept running into the same questions that caregivers would have about moving a loved one into dementia care. And I realized that there was no resource for people to go to. There was nowhere for them to find information on this very specific thing, moving somebody to dementia care. When should I do it? How should I do it? Why should I do it? And frankly, beating themselves up the entire time about that. So some things you should know. There's no one right way to provide care other than trying to do what's best for both parties. You're not always going to make the right choice. It's just what it is. When I'm teaching dementia care communication, I'm always telling people, learning this type of communication, and we'll get into a little bit of that, is sort of like learning another language. You're going to make mistakes in the beginning because you're learning something completely new. And people living with dementia do need help, even though they may be resisting that help and telling you that they're fine, they don't need any help, they don't need you to come over, they don't need to move to dementia care, they don't need to give up the car keys. They do. I always say that dementia is not an ask for permission group of diseases. What does this mean? This means if you wait for your loved one living with dementia to tell you that it's okay to take the car keys, that it's okay, that it's time to move them to dementia care, you're going to be waiting forever. This person's not going to give you that permission. And unfortunately, you are going to have to take that next step and do it anyway. We can't wait for the person to tell us when it's time to take over decision making. Again, you're going to be waiting forever. And guilt follows caregivers in unique and painful ways. I see this all the time. Even up until like last moments of working with families as their loved one is passing, they are still beating themselves up over a multitude of things. Many people feel as though they shouldn't make time for themselves. I see this especially with home caregivers when their loved one lives at home with them or lives nearby. This person feels like I shouldn't make any time for myself. I just need to be with them all the time. Caregivers are the best versions of themselves when they aren't the 24/7 caregiver. Taking care of a person with dementia 24/7 is essentially impossible. And I've had people argue, well, my parents, for example, my parents took care of me, right? My parents took care of me, so I need to take care of them now. I agree it would be good for you to be involved in their care, but being the 24/7 caregiver, taking care of someone living with dementia, taking care of someone who's declining is not the same as caring for a healthy, growing child, which is also very hard, but it's not the same as caring for somebody who's aging and declining. Reading up on the subject, I obviously recommend my 3 books with Johns Hopkins University Press, but I also recommend this book by Dr. Ann Kenny. It's called Making Tough Decisions About End-of-Life Care in Dementia. And she talks about 2 things that I think are really important to note. And no, they're not like fun topics, but they're really good to know about. So this first one is called ambiguous loss, which is, as she says, or Dr. Pauline, she quotes Dr. Pauline Boss. The difficulty is that the person is physically present, but at times psychologically gone. The relationship that you've always known is altered. She also talks about this idea of anticipatory grief. So she says this is the process of experiencing bereavement in advance of a loss, usually death, and it may last for years in families living with dementia as function and cognitive decline and caregiving needs increase. This book, Dr. Kenny's book, is really very, very interesting. It provides a lot of great resources. I learned a lot from it when I read it a few years ago. So I really recommend checking this book out. It's also wonderful when you're thinking about, is it time for hospice? Because a lot of times families wait an excessively long time to call hospice because they're not quite sure what hospice means. And at the end of this call, I'm going to have time for questions. So if you have a specific question about anything, including hospice or what have you, you can definitely ask then. If you're afraid you're going to forget the question, write it down, or you can also pop it in the chat. I cannot guarantee that I'll be able to stop and answer it during the presentation, but I'll do my best. Burnout is very real. For care partners, I see this, when the person's exhausted, but they don't want to let the person living with dementia down. They feel angry, frustrated, they feel hopeless. Feeling all these things really means it's time to get more help, not just for the person living with dementia, but also for you. You really cannot be the sole caregiver. Even if that means that your neighbor comes over and spends some time, with your loved one with dementia. If that means you bring in a home care company, if that means you consider transitioning them into a dementia care community, whatever that means. But being that person's everything all the time, it's just too hard. So let's talk about what it means to embrace somebody's reality. This, to me, in my mind, is the best, besides getting extra help, is the best antidote for avoiding extra stress with caregiving and extra burnout with caregiving, is avoiding a lot of the conflict that people have when they're communicating with their loved ones living with dementia by, you guessed it, embracing their reality. So let's dive into what this means, and I'll explain why I teach it all the time and why it's so necessary. Someone else coming. So I had a resident who always went out on our community's bus. This is my first building. She went out on our community's bus to go to her doctor's appointments. This quickly proved to be problematic because every time she would get back from the doctor's appointment, she would insist that she had to stay on the bus to take the bus so the bus could take her to her house. She used to take the bus around town, so this made sense. Well, one day she really decided she wasn't getting off the bus. It wasn't happening because she was like, this has to take me to my house. Well, unfortunately, this bus, of course, took her back to our dementia care community. Eileen was intent on not getting off this bus, and Eileen was a very quick-witted, dry-humored British lady, and she was what I like to call just confused enough to be confused. Just confused enough where she doesn't know what you're talking about, but just not confused enough why she can't tell you that you're wrong, right? She's at that like really difficult place in dementia for everybody, including her. So here was the problem. She wasn't getting off the bus. Me telling her something like, but you live here now. The bus can't take you home. You don't live at your house. That's not going to work. After about, I don't know, 2 hours of trying to coax this lady off of this bus, I said to the bus driver, you know what? Drive us around the block and take us to the back of the building. I want to try something. So he did that. We got to the back of the building and I said, Eileen, here's the situation. This bus is on a very specific route. We have to get off at this hotel. We'll hang out here for a little bit. We'll have dinner, and then we can get on a different bus, and that'll take you to your house. Finally, she was like, oh, okay. We got off the bus. We got inside. She had dinner. Everything was fine. We have to choose what's true for their reality. This is very hard for care partners at first. And honestly, this is a big part of the reason that people get burned out fast, because they're doing the opposite of this. They're doing what we call reorientation. So they're saying, no, don't you remember? Here are the facts. Live here now. They died years ago. Da, 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 da. And they're hitting this person with the truth of our reality. But here's the problem. As you well know, their reality is no longer the same as our reality, right? So trying to correct or argue isn't getting us anywhere. But people hear this and they go, well, wait a second. I don't want to lie to this person. Take the word lying, throw it away. Replace it with this concept of doing what's true for them in their reality. Here's a nice little drawing. Anytime I present this live, I do this same drawing on the whiteboard. Over here in the triangle, let's say we have a loved one, a client, a resident, whoever this person is to you. She's 83. She retired at 67, and her parents died years ago. Now, over here in the circle, we have the same person, but we have her reality. In her reality, she's 38, she's in the prime of her career, and her parents live nearby. Whoa, that's a very different shape, right? What do? We need to go to her world. We need to take the trip, go to her space. Take the word lying, throw it away. Not therapeutic lies, not white lies, not fiblets, not whatever. throw it out and replace it with this phrase, embracing their reality. Now, this is my phrase. I invented this phrase and I like it so much that I've got that little TM. I actually put it through the USPTO and trademarked it because I like it so much. But please tell it to people. Use it. Because embracing somebody's reality is a lot easier than trying to convince them of what you believe to be true, right? Or what is true. So here's what it isn't: therapeutic lying, fiblets, white lies, untruths, the validation theory. Now, validation sounds like embracing their reality, but it's not. Okay, because validation was invented by a woman named Naomi Feil forever ago. She just passed a couple months ago at the age of like 93. She was an Austrian woman, and she taught this validation theory. The challenge that I have with validation theory is that she says never lie. And so what she wants you to do is, when someone is saying, I miss my mom, where's my mom, to say something like, oh, sounds like you're sad and you miss her. Now, that was the kind of thing that I started trying at my first building when I worked in dementia care. Well, let me tell you something. It didn't work that well. I used it with that same lady from the bus, Eileen. One day she said to me, where's my mom? And I said, sounds like you miss your mom. And she said, obviously. Why does no one around here ever answer my questions? And I thought, oh, she's right. I didn't answer a question. I got scared by it and I dodged it. No, let's not do that. It's not redirecting. You're not redirecting the conversation. You're not distracting them with something else. It's not this, sounds like you miss your mom, give me a break. It's embracing their reality. Lying feels bad. So when we say, oh, therapeutic lying, it still doesn't sound good, right? It still doesn't sound great. So instead, let's go to the reality. We're not making anything up. We're not lying. We're doing what's true for that person in their reality, wherever it is. Let's talk about another thing that I run into frequently with caregivers, this concept of timeline confusion. What is it? It's not that they don't love you. It's not that they don't recognize you. It's not that they don't know you. It's that they can't place you on a timeline that makes sense to them. The first time this really clicked for me was, again, at my first building, where I learned a lot, clearly. And I had this resident, she would walk around, singing songs to herself. Her son would come to visit pretty frequently and walk around with her. And one day I went over to them and I said, hey, Nan, we have somebody coming to play piano and sing. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Why don't you come and sit with us? And she said, oh, wonderful. And she points to her son and she says, my husband is a wonderful singer. And I said, oh, great. Okay, well, I'll see you guys over there. Eventually, I found her son, by himself. And I said, I'm just curious. Does your mom usually think that you are your dad? And he said something I'll never forget and that I tell people all the time. And I wish I remembered his name so I could find him and tell him this. But he said, sometimes I'm me, sometimes I'm my dad, sometimes I'm my brother, and sometimes I'm just a friend. But she always knows that she loves me. And that was such a light bulb moment for me, because I realized, yeah, that's what it is. People are terrified that their loved ones with dementia are going to forget them. And I think a big part of this is because of how it's portrayed in movies. A lot of movies and TV shows now, you see more and more like characters living with dementia. And a lot of times it's getting a little bit better, but a lot of times dementia is a plot device. And I hate that. And I think that's where a lot of this comes from. So I always correct people when they talk about themselves as if they're forgotten. Oh, mom doesn't know who I am anymore. Mom knows who you are, but she just can't figure out why you're so old. She's looking for a 15-year-old version of you, and 65-year-old you walks through the door. Well, 65-year-old you probably looks a little bit different than 15-year-old you, right? She's looking for 15-year-old you, and she sees you and she goes, this lady looks familiar. She sounds familiar. I know that I like her. She's my mom. She's my sister. She's my somebody, right? She's going to assign an identity to you that makes sense on her timeline. I did this presentation, I don't know, years ago at this point. This is probably like 2015. And I had a guy raise his hand and he said, he had tears in his eyes and he said, I have 4 sisters and my mom recognizes all of them, but she doesn't know who I am. She doesn't know I'm me. And I said, well, who does she think you are? He said, she thinks I'm my dad. And I said, do you look like a younger version of your dad? He said, yeah, I look exactly like him. I was like, well, there you go. It's not that she doesn't know about you. She just can't, she looks at you and goes, she thinks that she's younger than she is. And she's like, okay, who's this guy? Well, he's my husband, right? So it makes a lot of sense. If their timeline is not linear anymore, how would you be the age that you are? So we do not want to announce our relationship to the person living with dementia. Here's what you don't want to do. Grandma, it's me. We don't want to assume you are who you were yesterday, although generally if they get to a certain place in their cognitive decline and they see you frequently and always think you are that person, that's fine. I've had many residents who created a name for me that was not my name. I had one resident who called me Susan every day, and I responded to it. I had another resident who called me Gwendolyn, which her daughter thought was hilarious because I said, have you guys ever known anyone named Gwendolyn? She was like, no. I have no idea where she came up with that. But that's what she called me every time she saw me. Okay, that's fine. Let them define who you are, right? I did this all the time with this woman, Linda, who called me Susan. So Linda always called me Susan. But interestingly, I was always a different Susan. So sometimes Linda was a master's level degree teacher, and she was obviously retired. She had early onset dementia, so she was on the younger side. And sometimes she thought I was her boss. Sometimes I was her student. Sometimes I was like her colleague. And I would wait to listen to her context clues to find out who she thought I was. And sometimes it was really obvious. So I would just go with that. I was like, okay, that's who I am today. Know that you're important to this person, even if they can't quite place you on their timeline. So if we look over here at this little picture, our timeline, linear, clear past, present, and future. Their timeline, it's all over the place. If they don't know how old they are, how can they know how old you are? Please don't quiz the person. Don't make them do any math, right? Well, remember, you were born in, 1940, and now it's 2024. So, no, come on. We don't need to make anybody do any math. It's not going to serve anybody. It's not going to help you at all. Back to this concept of embracing somebody's reality, back to this concept of living in their world and making it easier on both of you and making it so hopefully you can avoid that level of intense burnout and stress and maintaining a good relationship with this person over time. You need to live in their reality. Trying to remind them about who they are and who you are to them, let's not do it. This is why I always say, if you're going to bring a photo album out, fine, but let them tell you who everybody is. Don't correct them when they're like, that's my sister. And you're like, no, it's not. Who cares? This movie is a big reason that people don't understand timeline confusion because they messed it up. So this movie came out in 2004. And at the time, I also was like, yeah, this is real. This looks legit. It wasn't until I started studying dementia later where I thought back to this movie and I was like, they did a terrible job of this movie. Um, so in this movie, that's her husband. He comes to visit her all the time. He reads to her from a book that he wrote about their life. Da, 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 da. Anyway, she never knows who he is. Okay, allegedly. So every time he comes, he's reading to her and he's just like this magical stranger. Until one day they're dancing and she's like, oh my God, I remember who you are. It's like a light bulb moment. It's like dementia is a hat that she put on and took off, and suddenly she's completely lucid. This is not how dementia works. People do have moments where they're more with it or not, but it's not like, hey, remember that time I had dementia? That was wild. No. So here's what happened. And I can't actually take a clip from the movie. I can't find this clip. We're just I like to do it with a PowerPoint instead. So she says, how long before I forget again? He says, last time it was only a few minutes. She says, oh, I miss you so much. He says, I've been right here. I'll never leave you. Approximately 30 seconds pass. And she's like, who are you? And then it's chaos. She's screaming. She's crying. He's crying. The staff comes running in. It's nonsense. Here's what it would look like if they were actually living by real dementia-related rules, if they had actually consulted with anybody about what this could look like. Oh, I know this guy. He's someone that fits on my timeline, right? He's my dad. He's my uncle. He's my older brother. He's my cousin. He's my neighbor. She would have assigned a relationship to him. She wouldn't have just been like, oh, this random dude comes and reads to me every day. She would have an identity for him. I'm quite confident. And she would have some connection with him. And this whole thing with the dancing up here in the corner, that never would have happened. There might have been a day or two that she was like, hey, honey, like she might have been able to place him. But this like black and white, like, I don't know who you are, I'm completely clear on it. Nah. I always tell caregivers, recognize that whatever feelings you're having are valid. Recognize that relationships will change over time. And you have to allow for this acceptance, like allow yourself to feel everything that you feel about caregiving. And then to please get help, and whatever that means. That may just mean you see a therapist. That may mean you also have home care coming in to help you. You have, a neighbor, a friend, a sibling. Somebody is helping you with caregiving. All relationships change with dementia, right? Grown adult children and their parents. I've also heard of a couple more cases recently where the parents were actually taking care of an adult child who was living with dementia. So the parents did not have dementia, but the adult child did, which would be really, really tough. Spouses or partners, friendships, colleagues, close relatives, and then maybe consider relationships that weren't great to begin with. So I've seen some of this, right? People who feel they were forced to care for another person, divorced or separated spouses or partners. I've seen this. I actually had a caregiving situation, somebody in one of my communities, where the guy's ex-wife was like his main caregiver, which I thought was interesting. Adult children with abusive or alcoholic parents. I've seen that a number of times where the adult children are frustrated. They're like, I never had a good relationship with my dad. He was always drunk and we never formed a good relationship. And now, he's got dementia and I'm stuck caring for him. And so they feel guilty. They feel horrible for feeling that way. They feel horrible for feeling like they don't want to be that caregiver, but you really couldn't blame them. Adult children who happen to live in the same area as one parent, but maybe like they have 5 siblings and the siblings live like across the country or in another country. How these relationships can change. Spouses or romantic partners. This is a big, big challenge. Sometimes you see increased libido from the person living with dementia and the other partner is like, I don't want any part of this. Sometimes you see way decreased libido from the person with dementia. Maybe they're in early stages, but the other partner is still interested in being with their partner, and it's just not happening. No desire from the care partner. I once did a support group probably 3 years ago, and it was interestingly like everybody who came to the group that day, a virtual group, were wives of men living with dementia. And they all pretty much had this same problem. They pretty much all had the same problem where they just had no interest in sleeping with their husbands anymore, but their husbands were very interested in sleeping with them. And so it was always this awkward dance of just like, and the one woman said, I feel so terrible because I love my husband, but I feel like I'm his mom. I'm taking care of him 24/7. I don't see him anymore as a partner, and I feel terrible about that. But it was nice that they were all able to be in this group together because they all had the same feeling and they all felt terrible about it, but they could talk to each other. Also, you lose that lack of shared decision making. That's very, very, very hard when you're used to making that decisions with this person. Like I said, becoming the parent in the relationship, grown children and their parents or previous relationships or other family. Again, the lack of shared decision making. There's no checks and balances. The caregiver feels like, well, no one is helping me with this, or like no one's even weighing in on this. Like, how am I supposed to make these decisions myself? Becoming the parent in the relationship. Again, this person, feels like these people took care of me, but now we've completely flipped it and I'm taking care of them. And how challenging that can feel. The person with dementia doesn't want any help. They don't need any help. I don't want any help. They refuse help. They refuse care. And that makes it really, really difficult. And that can really accelerate and increase that burnout and that stress, right? So again, these are my rules for caregivers. Recognize that whatever feelings you have about caregiving are valid. None of these feelings are bad, and you're just there. I always say, you might not be in the same exact boat as another person, but you're in a very nearby boat. So when I have my care partner support groups, and by the way, everyone's welcome to join these. It's $10 a month, and I do these once a month, and we have a whole open forum where people can chat with each other 24/7 on a Slack channel. But I always say, everybody is caring for somebody living with dementia, and you're in different boats, but those boats are adjacent boats. They all have similar challenges, even if the situation is very different. Some of these people are caring for a spouse. Some of these people are caring for a parent, a sibling, and all of these things, all these relationships will change and have changed, but they're all in these kinds of similar boat. So allowing for acceptance, whatever feeling you're feeling is valid. And then, of course, getting that help. Give yourself a break. You're doing the best that you can. I felt really bad when I saw my friend who was caring for both of his parents posted on Facebook, I miss my parents every day, and I feel like I could have done more. I said, I don't know what you could have done. I truly do not know what else you could have. He was taking care of both of them at their house. His dad was trying to exit the house all the time, walk down the street. I mean, it was a lot. So it was a lot. So I saw a question in the chat, and I'm going to pull up the LE Cares site. So, and he says, that's the best way I've heard yet on how to explain this. And it does take the associated guilt with it away. Awesome. Thank you. I assume, Amy, you're talking about embracing their reality, because yes, people have an immense amount of guilt about lying to their loved one with dementia. And it takes up so much emotional space for people because they feel like, I'm making things up, I'm lying to them, or I always hear, mom told me never to move her. And here I am considering moving her to memory care. And it's like, if mom knew how much care she was going to need. I guarantee she wouldn't have said that. The place that, what she's thinking about when she says, like, don't move me to a home, she's probably thinking about a one flew over the cuckoo's nest situation, right? And so many of these care communities are beautiful and really nice. And that's not, the type of, that's the type of care you're looking for, not a really negative situation, right? So I see that all the time. Let's check out the Ellie Cares site. So Ellie Cares sponsoring this webinar today. I think this is a really cool app. And frankly, people come to me all the time to review their apps on dementia, and I turn them down because inevitably they're always missing this one key thing, which is understanding that in order to use an application, the person must, one, remember where their phone is and remember to charge it, right? This is something that is built for people in earlier stages when they can use it. And then when they can no longer use it, it's built for the care partner. So I really recommend checking this out.
Embrace the future confidently, knowing Ellie is there to support you. Ellie is a mobile app that champions safe, independent living for people with cognitive impairment, delivering peace of mind to families. Ellie can be used independently by people living with cognitive impairment or together with family members or caregivers for unobtrusive oversight. Missed appointments, tasks, or medications will be a thing of the past. Ellie sends notification reminders for appointments, tasks, and medications, ensuring your continued safe, independent living. You're never alone with Ellie. It promptly notifies connected family members when a reminder goes unactioned.
I love that.
Your family can continue supporting you, even when they're not there. Explore the freedom to roam with confidence, create safe zones, and if you venture beyond those, Ellie sends an alert, providing options to connect with family members or find your way home.
Which I think is really cool.
You need. Connected family members receive a notification too. They'll also have visibility of your mobile phone's battery status and know if and when you need their support. Embrace independent living with confidence, supported by Ellie, the app that cares.
So, oh, look, there's me. So I really recommend checking this out, and I'm going to pop this in the chat. You can download the app. They have a free trial. Donezepam, by the way, is Aricept. So a lot of people living with dementia are on Aricept, and they're constantly adding new features. So I think this is going to be a really, really cool, thing for people, because here we go. Upcoming feature launching March 24, which is now. This is going to be a support companion. So we're going to have like answers in here so people can actually go into this app and get dementia related answers. Because we were talking about this, I was talking with the woman who's in charge of this and saying, this would be huge. This would be so important because people don't know where to turn and they're just Googling. And as we know, sometimes Googling isn't the best thing to do, because I, for one, as many of you probably have, fallen down a medical rabbit hole Googling things I shouldn't be Googling and getting terrified over things that I have no proof of. So somebody in the chat said, how do you embrace this is a direct message. So she said, how do you embrace their reality if their reality is being awful to them? My mom has never done anything bad in her life, but now thinks the cops are after her. How do I embrace that and make her feel safe? Great question. So I always say, we want to be a shoulder to cry on, not deny on. Meaning, we want to still embrace that reality, even if it's scary, even if it's sad. The worst thing that we could do if somebody says to us, and I've seen this many times, oh, my so-and-so died yesterday, and that person died 30 years ago. The worst thing that you could say is, oh, no, they didn't. They died 30 years ago. Don't worry about it. Because now they're still dealing with that grief, and you just told them that the reality doesn't make any sense. And now they're thinking, wait a second, what? Right? So we want to embrace their reality wherever it is. And he thinks the cops are after it. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, I don't know why the police would be after you. I'm going to look into it. And this is a great response for accusations or anything else. So they're saying, your brother is stealing my money. I know it. I know it. He's stealing from me. We know that he's not, but instead of saying, no, he's not, we're going to say, Mom, that doesn't really sound right, but let me look into it for you. You're taking that burden and you're taking it on. We're going to do the same thing when someone's accusing somebody of like cheating on them. We see this a lot. Your father's cheating on me. I know it. Saying, no, he's not, isn't going to get you anywhere. You're going to say, you know what? I know he really cares about you, and I am pretty confident he wouldn't do that, but let me look into it. Same thing when they're accusing you of something. It really hurts my feelings. You would think that I would do that to you, but I'm going to find out where the money's going. I'm going to find out what's going on. I'm going to find, you're going to solve the problem. You're going to solve the emotional problem and not the physical one. Oh, I see people outside, oh, someone's trying to break into the house. Instead of saying, no, they're not, you're going to say, wow, that's really scary. Let me lock the doors. Let me lock the windows. Let me call the police. And then you're going to pick up your phone and you're going to make a fake phone call. And that's what you're going to do. Someone says, what is the cost of the LE app and how does it connect? Does it work in the woods? Not all areas are connected to the internet. Does it work? I have no idea if it works in the woods. I assume it does. I mean, it works on 5G, right? So like any of your applications are going to work off of 5G, even if you're not on Wi-Fi, unless you like for some reason don't have a data plan, in which case in this day and age I would definitely recommend getting a data plan. But how much does it cost? I think it's $4 a month, $5 a month after the free trial. So it's very doable. I'd recommend downloading it and checking it out. Somebody says, by the way, you're all writing directly to me, but feel free to unless you want it to be private, you can just type it in. Our mom's doctor told us why put her through official testing for dementia. If it walks like a duck and it looks like a duck, then it's a duck. But we would feel better for getting an actual diagnosis so we could get more comfortable, share that with close friends and family, help them understand what she's going through, and also wondering if that opens up resources for paid care or anything else. Do you have a suggestion on if it's helpful or to get diagnosed or not? Yes. So here's my rule about getting an official diagnosis. If you feel it is going to give you more information, fine. However, if you feel like it's going to give you more information at the cost of it being very traumatic to put this person through the hours of testing that are involved, pretty much they have to do like an hour to an hour and a half long psychometric exam. So it would be somebody like I did these exams back in the day. So I would ask this person a bunch of questions. We go through pictures. We look at the pictures. I say, what is this? What is this? It's like an hour plus of cognitive testing. Then they get a blood draw, they get a brain scan. It's a litany of tests. Now it will probably give you, a good deal of information, but it'll be biological information. Meaning, if you have a pretty good sense of where this person is with their dementia and their needs, I would not stress yourself about taking them to the doctor and like going through this whole rigmarole. I don't think you need to do that if you feel like, okay, I pretty much know what their dementia, acts like, looks like, and you don't need an official diagnosis. Also, honestly, a lot of the diagnosing, some of it there's some guesswork involved, frankly, because there are over 100 different causes of dementia, and a lot of times there's a lot of overlap with these diagnoses. So it can be difficult to say like, oh, this is specifically from this type of dementia, right? So again, sure, it's worth it if it's not going to be a whole thing. If it's not going to be really terrible to get this person to the doctor and to go through everything. This may also depend where you live. If you're in a city or near a big city, for example, Philadelphia has the Penn Memory Center. That would be a good place to go. In Pittsburgh here, we have the Bentham Center for Geriatrics, and we have the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. So if you live near a big city, you're going to have access to more of these big hospitals that are going to have these resources. If you're out in, a more remote area, you probably are going to have to get in the car and take a drive, and that may be a pain in the butt, right? So it really depends on where everything is. Another question. Oh, just helpful. Thank you. Helpful. Thank you. All right. You're very welcome. Does anyone have any questions? And feel free, by the way, to unmute yourself if you want to just like ask a question out loud. You're certainly able to do that. If you want to come on camera and ask a question, you can do that. And I'll give you a second to type or what have you. But I highly recommend checking out the LD Cares app. They're continuously coming out with new cool stuff. And we're really excited about it. So, and we're excited to be involved. Thanks for tuning in to this webinar about caregiver burnout. And if you want to learn more about, what we do at Dementia by Day, go to rachelwonderlin.com. Tons of resources, tons of free stuff in my store and beyond. If you're looking for like, hey, I love everything you shared today, where's like a place that I can get like all of it kind of in one spot, go to rachelwonderlin.com/shop. There is a $7, it's called an e-kit, $7 download in my store that has like a bunch of frequently asked questions all written out for you. So check that out if that's something that you'd like to share with family or friends. And feel free to get in touch if you like this. If you didn't like it, don't get in touch. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you all for being here. Hope you learned something, and see you around.